And that's what the Bible calls the coming mark of the beast system. And that's exactly what Klaus Schwab and the gang are building right before our very eyes around the whole globe and all the countries, with COVID plandemic as the trigger to start it all and the ongoing excuse to implement it all, okay? You think about it, folks, we have been totally duped, okay? Unless there be any doubts that this new seemingly innocent digital currency is going to be used to usher in a total global financial tyranny that the Bible says will one day be used by the actual Antichrist and false prophet to control all the buying and selling on the whole planet. Again, here are the same global elites talking about how this change to a single global digital currency is going to help create a global government at the, wait for it, here's where they said it, the World Government Summit back in 2022. Watch this.
Well, it may be a bit late for that. I remember talking to an Australian diplomat at one point about this break between the US and China, and said, you know, both sides are going to say, whose team are you on? And he said, our job is to make sure the question never arises. But the question has arisen. And so I think we have to go deeper. And it's not about the US versus China. It's about what underpins a world order is always the financial system. I was very privileged. My father was an advisor to Nixon when they came off the gold standard in '71, and so I was brought up with a kind of inside view of how very important the financial structure is to absolutely everything else. And what we're seeing in the world today, I think, is we are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new one, the new accounting, is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having an almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. But what I see are superpowers introducing digital currency. The Chinese were the first. The US is on the brink, I think, of moving in the same direction. The Europeans have committed to that as well. And the question is, will that new system of digital money and digital accounting accommodate the competing needs of the citizens of all these locations? Because that's the only measure of whether a world order really serves.
You know, my country was the first where they made cash illegal. 2016, digitalization was forced in the country. 8 o'clock in the evening announced midnight, cash was illegal, the big notes. And 70% of the economy crashed. This digitalization is now going all over the world, and there's a war on cash. They call it war on cash, because cash is merely a medium of exchange. It has no value in itself. It's just a promise. You read the dollar note, it says, I promise to pay the bearer. When it's digital, even a credit card, you know, you're giving rents to the global financial system. But when it's cryptocurrency in the hands of algorithms, in the hands of big tech, they will do what is happening in China. Create social credit system to decide a new caste system. And you might have also followed that while all this has been happening, the founder of the World Economic Forum did a book called The Great Reset on how to deal with the COVID crisis. And everything we're seeing unfold is part of that Great Reset.
In other words, this push for a digital currency is all part of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and these global elites' plan, and to use the COVID pandemic as a catalyst and or global crisis to usher in this reset of the global economy. And this new digital currency will help create that one world government, a one world economy, and a cashless society that requires biometric body parts to activate, that the Bible simply says it's the mark of the beast system. It's as plain as you can get. Okay, all the pieces are falling into place exactly like God said would happen nearly 2,000 years ago. And as dumb and as dangerous and as deceptive as all this is, as you've been seeing, hello, while we're all being apathetic or distracted, it's already being launched around the whole planet. But hey, once again, don't worry. They've come to our aid again and alleviated our so-called unfounded fears over this total financial control of our individual livelihood by this new controllable and programmable digital currency. You see, they say there's nothing to be afraid of, because here it is. Here's another relabeling. It's just the new social credit score system that you've been hearing about. No. It's the new ESG, or Environment Social Government System, that will help us to save the planet from blowing up. And you don't want that to happen, do you? Yeah, right. Let's expose that relabeling lie as well. Okay, starting with the first one, the social credit score system. What is that all about?
China's social credit system. Now, a lot of people either try to make excuses for it or they try to talk about how bad it actually is. I'm here to tell you that it's probably not what you think, but it in fact is probably much worse than you think. Everyone likes to make this comparison of China's social credit system to the episode of Black Mirror, where the woman is basically in a dystopian future where everyone has this app and they're basically rated on their popularity, whether people like them, and they're rated out of 5 stars and they're segregated as such. So, for example, car rental companies won't rent to people below a certain score. People will judge you for being below a certain threshold, not invite you to events. Companies might reject you from jobs. But anyway, all of this is based on the ability of everybody else being able to rate each other. So it's not really the same as China's social credit system in that in China, nobody is rating each other. Another misconception I'd like to get out of the way first is comparing it to the credit system, the credit score system of the US. So think of things like FICO. Most of you are probably familiar with a financial credit score that rates your financial trustworthiness. It's intended to give creditors an indication of risk and how likely you are to repay your loan commitments. However, outside of transactions, a bad credit score does not prevent you from seeing your family or enrolling your kids in public school. In China, an individual's finances, social media activities, credit history, health records, online purchases, tax payments, legal matters, and people you associate with, in addition to images gathered from China's 200 million surveillance cameras and facial recognition software. By the way, do the math. That is 1 surveillance camera for every 7 citizens. So what I want to talk to you today about is how actually your social credit score is rated, what it means for you, how you gain and lose points, and how the kind of tier system, the caste system that they've created actually affects people in China. I actually found the framework and the documents used by the Chinese government to roll out their social credit system. So keep in mind, this is how the social credit system is being experimented with, and then eventually how it was rolled out to other areas. So this is in its purest form. The government basically divvied out 1,000 points to its citizens, and they're kept by local Communist Party officials. This is their baseline. So you can either go above 1,000 or you can go below 1,000. But basically, before we talk about what gives and takes away points, I want to tell you guys how their tier system works. So it's very ironic that in China, a communist country, people are rated based on their credit worthiness, right? So they have this tier system, a caste system, basically, that puts people really high up or really low. The highest tier is called AAA. Of course, that is the best. It is called model of credit worthiness. If you have 1,050 points or higher, so this means you went above the baseline, you get some benefits, right? The second tier is called AA, or exceptional credit worthiness. This is basically the same benefits of AAA. There's no difference, but the next level is the A credit worthiness, and this one comes in 3 different flavors. You get A+, A, and A-. So this is when you're kind of hovering around, what they divvied out in the beginning. These are your benefits. You get to be entered on a list to be used as a model in publicity. So you give the ability to the government to use you as a model citizen for publicity. Wow, awesome. You get priority in school enrollment and other social assistance. So this is scary. This is a few Chinese social programs that they actually have. You have to be an A to kind of get priority assistance for these things. And school enrollment is supposed to be completely non-competitive in terms of what schools you go to outside of your grades. So now it's changing to that if you are not a good model citizen, your kids don't get to go to good schools, which is terrifying. You get preferential care in employment, social assistance, and you get preference over equally qualified competitors in promotion or retention. So this is in jobs and work and things like this. And by the way, I'm not talking about some secret speculation. These are the official documents that say this. If you're an A, you get treated as a better person. Next is relatively creditworthy. So that's when you've dipped below 1,000, right? You're locked into it for 2 years. And what happens now is if you're in a B tier, You're probably going to get lectures and visits from people, the government officials, and they're going to tell you how you can improve your score, right? But you're going to be locked in there in like probation for 2 years. Now, when you drop down to a C, when you're at like 600 to 849 points, you're locked in there for 3 years before you can move up to a B even. More visits from officials. They're going to be watching you, making sure you're on good behavior. They're going to be scrutinizing you in daily life. You're going to be on a list now. Now, this list won't go to the full public with all of your information, address, age, what you did wrong, blah, blah, but it will go to other government officials. So they said it will go to a limited audience. When you drop to the lowest tier, and this is D, this is called not creditworthy. Basically, it's like if you talk about Indian caste system, it's the untouchables. You're locked into level D for 5 years, right? So this is, when you're locked into D, you're talking about the officials are coming to visit you all the time. They can cancel any government funding that you have. So not just temporarily suspend it. We're talking about canceling the government subsidies. You go on a blacklist, and this is public. All Ds will go public. So publicly disclosing the information on their untrustworthiness. They can revoke all of your titles. So if you had a PhD or scientific discoveries, you'll have that erased, right? You can't get a loan, and you can actually lose your job over this. So if it's tied to what happened, like what you did to be untrustworthy according to the government, they can actually completely get rid of your qualifications and actually strip away your job. So you're locked into there for 5 years. But what you have to understand is that there's all kinds of direct judgment factors. So the Chinese government actually says if you commit an intentional crime, right, this brings you to the bottom of D. It's not like some sort of sliding scale here. If you went out there and did something bad on purpose, you just straight go down to D. But let me make one thing super clear. If you are a political dissident or you speak out against the government, you're screwed either way. The Communist Party of China will just lock you up or disappear you, okay? This is not a country with a rule of law. This is more of a system to coerce and influence future behavior, and to standardize it for greater and ultimate control over the population. So now that you know all these tiers, right, I actually wanted to break down and make it super easy on some of the ways you can gain or lose them. Now there's like 1,000 different ways you can gain or lose points, but I'll highlight some random ones. And what I want to do is take the average Joe, and I mean Z-H-O-U, and we're gonna make 2 of them. We're gonna make Hao Joe, and we're gonna make Huai Joe. And Hao means good and Huai means bad. And they're both gonna start with 1,000 points, and we're gonna go through some of the things that they're gonna do good and some of the things that they'll do bad with the same baseline to see where they end up. If you overdraft on your credit card or your bank, minus 10 points. If you return lost money, we're talking 10,000 RMB or more, and this is probably returning lost money to the government, by the way. If you just somehow come across it, that's not leading people to scams at all. That's plus 10 points. If you use WeChat, forums, blogs, or other internet technology, so just the internet, to publish and transmit negative information, that's minus 50. And that's just negative information about the government. If you disseminate false speech, incitement, or cause trouble on WeChat groups, however, so not like person to person, that's minus 30. So sending a message literally on social media can knock you down minus 50. And if you do it in a WeChat group, that's minus 30. If you report illegal conduct, such as people participating in feudal superstition, so Chinese religions and things like that, unlawful construction, environmental pollution, or participation in cult organizations, that's a plus 10. So basically, if you're a rat, you get plus 10. If you don't accept the investigations from the officers that are trying to look into why you're breaking laws or breaking rules or you're losing social credit, if you don't allow them to come collect evidence on you, that's another minus 20 points. If you are a part of a community, which everyone is in China, basically the community has like a Communist Party head. And if you go around and help them get information on all the people that are staying there, because keep in mind, you can't just randomly stay in a random place in China. You have to register. It's a very archaic system under Chairman Mao. It still exists. If you go around and get that information on who's currently there and then report back to the Communist Party of China, you get plus 3 points. Tax evasion, minus 100 points. Seriously though, the entire system of China is tax evasion, and it's led by the tax officials. All right, that's just kind of how it works. If you help the community resolve a major dispute between neighbors, plus 10 points. I think that takes some pressure off the cops. If you go into the traffic stuff, if you get a fine between 500 and 2,000 RMB, which is really easy to do, especially if you go a tiny bit over the speed limit because of the speed cameras everywhere in China, that's a minus 10 points. But also, if you get a parking ticket twice, that's minus 10 points as well. If you set off firecrackers, dance in a square, like those old women that like to do that, without properly applying for a permit. Playing with a spinning top, I'm not joking, I'm quoting this, and using a high-pitched radio horn to produce noise, or raising animals that interfere with other people's lives. That's a minus 5. And if you've been to China, you'd know why they might want to consider a law like that. Illegally holding classes, that's minus 50 points. So if you're teaching people anything, really, it's minus 50 points. They don't want people to having underground meetings, basically. It needs to be in a CCP run or looked at school. If you help the cops capture criminals or provide evidence, basically ratting them out, you get plus 20 points on that one. Surprise, surprise. If you violate reproductive planning policies, meaning you break the 2-child policy in that you have 3 children, or you don't allow the government to sterilize you, which actually does happen in the government reproductive planning buildings throughout the countryside, that's minus 40. So if you have an extra kid, bye-bye social credit. If you donate organs, unpaid, so you're not getting paid for them, plus 100 points. And I'm assuming you have to donate organs of family members, because I'm pretty sure you probably shouldn't be donating organs of people you don't know, or your own. If you're donating your own organs, you probably wouldn't be, alive to have a social credit score, but whatever. Unauthorized renovation of houses, minus 5. But if you receive a national level reward, plus 100 points. So I wonder if my presidential PE award counts from gym class. If you make a tombstone that's too big, like it exceeds the area and height limits, minus 100 points. And that's crazy. No land is in short supply, but that's nuts. If your kid joins the army, plus 5 points. Now this one's interesting. In China, in the Constitution of China, you have the ability as a citizen to petition to Beijing directly to the government if you have a grievance and if it's not being resolved, right? So petitioning to the government doesn't mean you can go out and protest. It means you can go file a petition letter. Now what happens is if you submit a petition, so here in Shandong we have Rongcheng, which is like a small city, then Weihai, which is the bigger city of its area, right? And then you have Beijing, which is the capital of China. If you petition a complaint to Weihai, like the next up city, rather than petitioning to Rongcheng, you get minus 10 points. So they're actively trying to stop people from petitioning to higher officials. If you petition to a provincial level, like straight up to Shandong, that's minus 20. And if you petition directly to Beijing, that's minus 50. So literally, if you have a problem that you need resolved and you need the government to help you with, if you go to Beijing to petition, you literally lose 50 social credit points, even though it's in the Constitution. Think about that for a second. They just literally want people's problems to be confined to their areas so that they can micromanage and control them. If your kid receives a recreational award or a sports award on a provincial level, you're going to get a plus 20 social credit points. So you think about like Timmy wins state championships with his football team. Your social credit points just went up. Another way to lose points is if you get criticism. So there's this thing called self-criticism in China. If you work in the party or you work even in a company, if you do something wrong or the boss thinks you did something wrong, you have to do a self-criticism. And a self-criticism is where you have to make a statement or say in front of everybody like why you are wrong. If you're ordered to have one of those, that's minus 5. If they circulate it, if they actually put it in the newspaper and they'll be like, this so-and-so was bad because of this reason. If that happens in the city newspaper, minus 10. If it goes all the way up to Weihai, like the bigger city, if that gets circulated there, then that's minus 30. And I think you can see the trend here. This is kind of how Chinese media works, is there's stages. It goes super local, higher, 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 higher. And the higher up you go, the worse it is for your social credit score. Now, if we look at these tallies here, you can kind of understand how this works nominally. So what it looks like to me is that the government really is using this social credit system as ultimate control. Almost like a Jason Bourne Minority Report system, that people will be too scared to do anything in the future. And they'll know what to avoid, because when I look at the crimes or the things that really take away points on the social credit system, they're things that are against the government. They're things that are speaking out against the government. They're things that are critical against the government. Less so things that actually should be changed within Chinese society. And that's kind of disappointing. The big focus here, are your kids being good? Are you being good? Are you being loyal to the government? And that's terrifying. I see a lot of dictators around the world, if they were to read in the framework of this, would be salivating over this. It goes much further than just public shaming for jaywalkers, because China likes when the soft power comes out. There's, oh, look at this jaywalker got publicly shamed, and everyone's like, around the world, they're like applauding. They're like, yeah, what a dirtbag. Can't believe you jaywalk like this. But the implications are much more than that. The shaming behavior is one thing. This is more than shaming bad behavior. This is shaming actual potential dissidents and people that want to speak out and have freedom. This is the end. I mean, there was no freedom to begin with, but this kind of starts to delete the gray area that made China what it was. Although the system is beneficially in the works since 2014, what leadership could have come up with something like that, huh? Unlike media portrayals of some app that you can check to see if someone is good or bad based on the government, the reality of what the social credit score really is much more complicated, and it's much more sinister. At the same time, China's paid 50-cent army, or the nationalist disinformation team you might see trolling around comment section, they want the rest of the world to think that it's either exactly the same as a FICO credit score, or a handy tool to punish criminals. It's much bigger than that.
And that's the system that Klaus and the gang want to bring to the whole planet. And this is why Klaus stated on tape that he thought, quote, China was a model country. This is the model he wants to bring to all of us. Okay, and that's why whistleblowers are starting to sound the alarm on what this social credit score system will really allow these global elites around the world to do to all of us if it gets implemented like China, as this man shares.
So let's get back to China for a second. So China just created their central bank, the digital yuan. Then they banned every other cryptocurrency. Then they linked the social credit system to cryptocurrency, which means if the Chinese government, who controls the central bank, doesn't like what you say, they could restrict, limit, or outright deny you the ability to transact. So now I don't have to put a bullet in your head. I'll just prevent you from buying bread.
And that's why we need to speak up as fast as we can about this. But again, hey, no worries, no worries. Klaus Schwab and the gang of global elites have relabeled this Chinese social credit score system again, just in case, you catch on to this evil empire sweeping the planet, okay? You see, you don't need to worry, folks. No siree. It's merely the new ESG scoring system. I mean, doesn't that sound much better? Yeah, right. It's the exact same thing as this man shares.
What is an ESG risk score? ESG score is an acronym that stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance Score. An ESG risk score gauges a company's performance on ESG issues and exposure to ESG-related risks. They are calculated against a set of ESG metrics and may be expressed on a number scale from 0 to 1, 0 to 10, 0 to 100, or through a letter ranking system such as A to F. The scores themselves and surrounding context fill in the picture of a company's performance on environmental, social, and governance issues. Some scoring reports also even have a controversy ranking, which I find shocking, since one man's controversial company is another man's company that stands by its principles. Who are the ESG rating agencies? Several third-party providers, including agencies and research and analysis firms, evaluate companies on ESG performance and determine independent ESG scores for investment decisions and comparison against peers. Some agencies include Bloomberg ESG Data Services, Corporate Knights Global 100, Sustainalytics ESG Risk Ratings, Dow Jones Sustainability Index Family, Thomson Reuters ESG Scores, and Rep Risk. What is a good ESG risk score? Methodology, scope, and coverage vary significantly among each agency. Bloomberg and Corporate Knights rate companies on a 100-point scale, for example. Thomson Reuters assigns a score of 0 worst to 1 best, with a corresponding letter grade. Rep Risk measures companies on a Rep Risk index of 0 to 100 and provides a rep risk rating of AAA to D. How is data used in the score collected? Well, it's one of two ways. It's either self-reported or it's from publicly available data sets. Depending on the agency, some exclude self-reported data and only rely on publicly available data in order to generate a score. What constitutes the ESG environmental category? Environmental factors range from a company's greenhouse gas emissions to its treatment of animals. Common evaluation criteria include metrics on climate change, soil and water contamination, renewable energy, and environmental policy. What constitutes the ESG social category? Social factors examine a company's business relationships with employees, suppliers, partners, shareholders, and other groups throughout the supply chain. For example, are workers in a factory abroad treated ethically? Do employees earn a living wage? Are facilities regularly inspected and safe to work? Can employees take leave when they are sick or for other personal reasons? Social scores might also reflect charitable contributions, customer interactions, community impact, and policy influence. What constitutes the ESG governance category? Governance criteria evaluate legal and compliance issues in board operations. For example, does the company abide by all local, state, and federal laws? Does company composition represent diverse backgrounds and perspectives? How does executive and non-executive compensation compare to the company's peers? Are all scores public? Some ESG ratings and reports are publicly available. The Dow Jones score, for example, releases world and regional indices on top-performing companies annually. Other ratings and reports, such as those from Bloomberg and Rep Risk, are created for investors about companies they want to invest in. Those who are for the continued proliferation and use of ESG scores say organizations with a good ESG risk score are thought to be better equipped to anticipate future risks and opportunities, more inclined to long-term strategic thinking, and to prioritize long-term value creation over short-term gains. Research increasingly shows that companies that adhere to ESG principles are low-risk investments and more resilient over time. For that reason, forward-thinking boards stay informed about their company's ESG issues and activities, the various third-party organizations evaluating their efforts, and their ESG risk scores. This all sounds very wholesome and enlightened, so what could possibly go wrong? Well, let's look at the other side. Throughout history, loans for individuals and companies were based solely on the risk of them paying back the loan, not what their views on solar panels or COVID mask mandates were. In fact, they were never based on anything related to their social or political views for that matter. ESG, in my view, is not enlightenment and information. It is a cage for your mind and your financial freedom. I can easily see ESG being used as just another political tool to wield power over your thoughts and beliefs, enforce compliance for government-prescribed orthodoxy. Companies with views that are not politically correct will have a low score. Companies produce technology that is not considered progressive, like a gasoline-powered car, will have a low score. Companies that are not charitable to the right organizations at the right moment, depending on the political winds, will have a low score. Companies with a low score will have difficulty getting loans and expanding their business, and will pay higher interest on the loans they're trying to get or currently have. But this score is not just about the score of the companies you invest in. This is the real danger. Consider it guilt by association. If the ESG of all the companies you invest in is, let's say, a 3 out of 10, then guess what? It is very reasonable that the government, investors, or a company that wants to hire you can assume your ESG score would be about a 3 out of 10, assuming that this information becomes public. Is it that hard to believe that a bank or a company could get hold of this ESG score and tell you clearly you are not a big fan of the environment or social justice or government rules during a pandemic that are meant to protect people, so you are not worthy of a job or loan with us at this time. However, go to this other ESG repair agency, and once your score is high enough, then we'd love for you to come back to us. Much like happens today when people try to get a loan and are often pointed to a credit repair agency in order to raise their credit score. Same idea. This is the real danger with this, is it could definitely be used and abused for the wrong reasons. ESG scores will be used to abuse, sanction, and discriminate individual liberty and beliefs.
Which is exactly what the Chinese social credit score system does. So once again, it's the exact same thing, only called by a different name. I mean, how dumb do they think we are? All they do is relabel their dangerous, deceptive tactics and repackage it, and unfortunately, we fall for it all over again. Okay? The ESG scoring system is the exact same thing, the exact same type of digital financial prison planet that the Chinese population and government's already doing and using. Okay? And that's why the new term for all these financial prison planet scoring systems, whatever you want to give them, is called, listen, techno-communism. In other words, it's a digital financial form of communism. And that's why these whistleblowers are sounding the alarm on this ESG score system, as well as it'll allow these global elites and Klaus Schwab and the gang to do to us, okay? In short, it will destroy everything, as this reporter shares.
So because of ESG, Germany is now rationing electricity. Because of ESG, farmers are in revolt in the Netherlands. But the saddest victim of ESG is Sri Lanka. Once a prosperous country right off the southern coast of India, Sri Lanka has collapsed. Inflation is over 50%. Food prices are up more than 80%. This week, Sri Lanka's president and prime minister had to flee the country. Citizens stormed their residences, went through their sock drawers and swam in their swimming pools. Now, it was just a few years ago that the World Economic Forum published an article entitled, and we're quoting, "This is how we will make Sri Lanka rich by 2025. Weirdly, if you search that article online tonight, it's been deleted. Whoa, weird, covering their tracks, but not very well. So how'd this happen? Well, in April of 2021, Sri Lanka's leaders banned chemical fertilizers. Now, 90% of the country's farms used chemical fertilizers. So what happened next? A third of Sri Lanka's farms shut down completely. Now, what happens when farms shut down? Quiz. Well, people starve. This is what the largest city in Sri Lanka, Colombo, looked like this week. That's what the Green New Deal looks like in Sri Lanka. Now, we know what you're thinking. Oh, so pampered lifestyle liberals in the United States just destroyed something else. They did to Sri Lanka what busing did to American education, just absolutely wrecked it and then walked away like it never happened. So that's the downside. People's lives were destroyed. It's happened a lot. But here's the good news. Sri Lanka has a virtually perfect ESG score. Sri Lanka's score is 98 on the ESG scale. That's more than double our score here in the United States. So we're going to need to step up our efforts to shut down farms. Peter Earle is an economist who follows all this stuff. Peter, thanks so much for coming on. ESG seems like the kind of idea that winds up in the pictures you just saw. This seems inevitable for any place that applies it.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for having me. What you see here is what's really happening in a lot of places, which is where you have ideologies, and in particular woke ideologies, replacing prices and markets. You get these sort of classic misallocations of resources.
So Sri Lanka had a 98% ESG score. So like they won. Why aren't the people there happy? I mean, just because they're starving to death, but are there other reasons? Don't they feel virtuous and good about themselves?
It doesn't seem like it. No, I have a feeling that you need a minimum of like 1,500 calories a day to really enjoy the fruits of this sort of like intellectual atrocity that's going on over there.
And around the world, whether you call it the social credit score system or the ESG scoring system. It's all the same thing, folks, and none of it's good. Unless there be any doubt who's behind it all, here's a recent interview with Klaus Schwab, not only once again praising China's role in all this, but he admits this is all part of his plans for, listen, a systematic transformation of the world.
On the G20, you were there meeting some of the leaders as well. Professor Schwab, what do you make of the result? Finally, they put something as a statement, and it seems quite positive with all the voices included.
I think it's positive. It's already positive through the fact that everybody agreed about the statement, which we haven't had the last years. Now the base has been formed, but we have to go one step further. We have to have a strategic mood. We have to construct the world of tomorrow. It's a systemic transformation of the world. So we have to define how the world should look like, which we want to come out of this transformation period. I respect China's achievements, which are tremendous over the last over 40 years. I think it's a role model for many countries.
Is this guy insane or what? China is a role model? Not only with their tyrannical social credit score system tied into their new digital yuan currency, but all the other blatant violations of basic human rights and murderous, oppressive behavior. They're a role model? Are you nuts? But folks, this is a part of the systematic transformation of the world that Klaus and the World Economic Forum and the global elites are working on. You basically bring China's system to the whole planet. You know, techno-communism. But just, hey, relabel it with different names and for different areas of the world, and nobody will know. Shh, right? You liar. And speaking of liars, good thing this Chinese techno-communism, this financial prison planet, thought control system that Klaus and the gang want to bring to the whole world, good thing it's never going to happen here in America. Yeah, again, sarcasm to make the point. But then you're thinking, well, come on, we would never go along, not here in America, with creating a financial digital prison to enslave and control our individual livelihoods. Well, first of all, how I wish that were true. Second of all, the sad fact is this. It's already being put into place with, shocker, Klaus Schwab's buddy, Joe Biden, Mr. Build Back Better himself. And his latest push for an American version of this digital financial control system called CBDC, or the new digital dollar. Okay? China has the digital yuan. Now apparently we get the new digital dollar. Once again, you just relabel it all and somehow it makes it all go away. Yeah, right. Okay, but again, don't take my word for it. Let's see what this new proposed CBDC, or new digital dollar from the Biden administration, really is. Okay, here's first of all Rishi Sunak, the new Prime Minister of England, Klaus's new trainee or puppy dog, promoting CBDC currency as the greatest thing since sliced bread. Watch this.
Today, I'm proud to say that under the UK's presidency, the group of the world's 7 most advanced economies, the G7, is launching a set of public policy principles for retail central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Central bank digital currencies could be a digital version of money, a bit like a digital banknote that could be used alongside physical notes and coins. Unlike most of the digital money people use daily today, it would be issued directly by a central bank, like the Bank of England in the UK. And governments and central banks across the world are working together, looking into what having a digital currency might mean in practice. This includes issues that people care about, such as ensuring users' money would be safe and secure, that it could work with other ways to pay, would be energy efficient and available to everyone. A potential CBDC could offer businesses and consumers new ways to pay in the future. It's all part of the wider story of digital innovation that has delivered benefits to millions around the world and in the UK. We're excited to be taking a leading role with G7 members in publishing this exploratory work, bringing money and finance into the 21st century.
You mean converting the financial system of Western nations into the prison planet that Klaus is launching everywhere, modeled after China, okay? But hey, maybe that's just the UK, right? right? This digital CBDC currency system, it's not coming to America, right? Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, it's already being put into play by Mr. Build Back Better, Mr. Joe Biden, Klaus's buddy, with, listen, a recent signed executive order. As you can see here, and I quote, check it out yourself, folks, Executive Order 14067, ensuring responsible development of digital assets, was signed. And that was done on March 9th, 2022, and it basically calls for a digital dollar, in which some are now calling Biden bucks, if you can believe that will function as, quote, CBDC currency right here in the United States. And all that is, shocker, is another relabeling of the Chinese social credit score system and the ESG, okay, where soon, listen, this will be our reality in America. Quote, I'm sorry, sir, your card was declined due to your political views. And it's so obvious, folks, where these Biden bucks or America's version of a CBDC currency system is going to lead us, just like China, that several whistleblowers are blowing the lid completely off of this. Watch this.
Where were you on March 9th, 2022, when President Biden signed the death warrant on American freedom? On that day, in a hush ceremony at the White House, without the approval of Congress, the states, or the American people, Biden signed into law Executive Order 14067. Buried in his order are a few paragraphs titled Section 4. The language in Section 4 makes Order 14067 the most treacherous act by a sitting president in the history of our republic, because Section 4 sets the stage for legal government surveillance of all U.S. citizens, total control over your bank accounts and purchases, and the ability to silence all dissenting voices for good. In this new war on freedom, the Dems aren't coming for your guns. No, they're thinking much bigger than that. They're coming for your money. And it's already started. Thanks to Section 4 of Biden's Order 14072, ordering urgent research into developing the digital dollar, I believe the U.S. dollar, the standard of the world since 1792, will be replaced by a new currency, the digital dollar. These new electronic currencies are called CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies. I call the digital dollar Biden bucks because I want him to take full credit for what I consider to be crimes. This is not like the money in your online bank account. No, this is new and different. Every digital dollar will be a programmable token like Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, but there's a big difference. Cryptocurrencies are decentralized digital currencies. Instead, if it plays out the way I see it, Biden bucks will have the full backing of the U.S. Federal Reserve. They will replace the cash, fiat dollar we have now, and will soon be the sole mandatory currency of the United States. When Biden bucks are rolled out, many experts, myself included, believe they will begin an era of total government control and surveillance. This is not hyperbole. This would dramatically expand the power and influence of the federal government, essentially acting as a new type of spyware. With Biden bucks, the government will be able to force you to comply with its agenda, because if you don't, they could turn off your money. This won't be like freezing a bank account. It will be so much easier, because Biden bucks will be digital tokens programmed at the source. They could be turned on or off at will with just a keystroke, and they could be reprogrammed at any time. With Biden's secret surveillance army running the show, the anti-freedom implications are almost limitless. For example, Biden bucks could be programmed to allow only certain kinds of purchases. Imagine what this new world could look like. You want to keep an internal combustion engine car? Your digital dollar suddenly won't pay for gas. Instead, you can be forced to buy an electric vehicle. That's just the tip of the fascist iceberg. They can force you to get vaccinated. They can force you into solar. They can force you to use less water or heat. They can force you to eat fake plant-based meat. They can control where you are allowed to travel. They can stop you purchasing certain items like guns, ammo, or survival supplies. They can control to which candidates you're allowed to donate. And they'll know every single place you spend your money, forever. America would become a surveillance state like China or North Korea. Every single aspect of your life could be controlled because they'll control your money. In fact, I fully expect them to implement a social credit rating system like in China. Say the wrong thing on social media, buy the wrong thing, subscribe to the wrong news channel, give money to the wrong candidate, and your rating drops. Suddenly your Biden bucks are frozen or disappearing from your account. This is already happening in China. There, a low social score gets you officially labeled untrustworthy. They can take away your ability to travel, restrict your internet access, deny your family the best schools or jobs. They may even take away your pets. I'm not kidding. All this is going on today. But that's China, an oppressive communist country. Could this really happen in a democracy? Just ask the truckers in Canada, because that's exactly what happened to them. Their Prime Minister Trudeau was granted special emergency powers during the peaceful trucker protest over his forced vaccination law. He then ordered all banks to freeze the accounts of the protesters and anyone who aided them in any way. And it wasn't just a threat. That fascist froze the bank accounts of non-violent protesters. He locked up over $6 million in private accounts for protesting a forced vaccination law that truckers believe violated their sovereign human rights. Think about that. They protested his policies, so he took away their money. Think our current government would love to do that? Me too. Under Biden bucks, we'll lose many of our God-given American rights. They'll be replaced by total government surveillance and control. For almost all Americans, this will be the death of freedom, forever.
I'm pretty skeptical. I keep asking anybody at the Fed or outside of the Fed to explain to me what problem this is solving. I can send anybody in this room $5 with Venmo right now. Right? No, seriously. So what is it that a CBDC could do that Venmo can't do? And all I get is a bunch of hand waving. I get a bunch, well, maybe it's better for financial inclusion. Maybe it's better for cross-border remittances. Maybe. Is there any evidence that it is? And, they say, well, what about China? China's doing it. Well, I can see why China would do it. If they want to monitor every one of your transactions, you could do that with the central bank digital currency. You can't do that with Venmo. If you want to impose negative interest rates, you could do that with the central bank digital currency. You can't do that with Venmo. And if you want to directly tax customer accounts, you could do that with the central bank digital currency. You can't do that with Venmo. So I get why China would be interested. Why would the American people be for that?
The most important thing today are credible sources, and we listen to Jim all the time. What is your concern on Executive Order 14067, which was just signed with Biden and company only a few months ago? What is your concern 14067?
Yeah, it has a number of parts, and the thing with executive orders, or for that matter, legislation, I can say you have to read the fine print, and you do, but you have to actually consider the hidden agendas. Like, I can read it. Anyone can read it. It's a public document, but what's behind it and where are they going with it? And that's really where the urgency comes in. It's basically an order that accelerates the U.S. movement towards a central bank digital currency, so-called CBDC. These are happening all over the world. Beijing already has one. They're past the prototype stage. They kind of rolled that out during the Winter Olympics, last February. Believe it or not, the Bahamas has a digital currency. There are a few other countries that have already gone in that direction. Europe is the European Central Bank is very far along. The U.S. and the Federal Reserve, all of a sudden, they accelerated it. And they said, no, we got to move fast on this, and we got to catch up. And that's what 14067 was about. But so that's kind of what you could get from reading. But what's the hidden agenda? Well, first of all, just a little bit of background on central bank digital currencies. It's still the dollar, so a digital dollar is still a dollar, a digital Chinese yuan is still a yuan, a digital euro is still a euro. So it's not a new currency, but it is a new payment channel, and it is a new form of the currency, if you want to think of it that way, even though it's still the dollar. And it goes hand in hand with getting rid of cash. But what else? And this is the key, and this is why we're sounding the alarm a little bit on Executive Order 14067. So once it's digital, a couple things. First of all, they know your whereabouts. Now, they already know your whereabouts from your iPhone, unless you turn your iPhone off, and not just turn it off, but put it in what's called a Faraday sac, which is a special woven fabric of a metallic weave that blocks radiation. And by the way, do the same thing with your EasyPass and a bunch of other stuff. But unless you do that, then they know where you are through your iPhone or your Samsung or whatever. So they already know your whereabouts. We have facial recognition software. People go, I'm going to wear a mask and sunglasses and pull my hat down. Okay. They have what's called gait recognition software, GAIT, meaning how you walk. And it's like a fingerprint. So even if you're wearing a mask, they see you walking down the street. They're like, that's Kim, or that's Robert, or Jim, or as the case may be. So they already know a lot, and they know your whereabouts. But now they're going to know what you're buying, right? Because every product has a SKU, stock keeping code, stock keeping unit code, with a QR scan, digital scan. They're going to know what you're buying. And this digital currency is programmable. meaning they can block certain purchases or not. So let's say you donate money to Elise Stefanik. She's an up-and-coming Republican member of the Republican leadership at an upstate district in New York, or if you donate money to Donald Trump. Well, they'll know that, first of all, and you might find that your account's frozen. Or let's say they want to see right now, if you work and you're an employee, it's a technical term defined, and you get paid and you get a W-2 at the end of the year, but they withhold it from your payment. They get paid every 2 weeks or whatever. Employer withholds taxes from your wages, and then you get your W-2, file your tax return, you reconcile, and maybe you get a refund, maybe you owe a little bit, but they got the money up front through withholding. But that's not true for independent contractors and professionals, so doctors, lawyers, architects, landscaping, so anybody who's not a W-2 employee doesn't have withholding. They got to pay their taxes. But what if they could just take it out of your bank account? It's like, yeah, okay, you're a doctor, but you put the money in this bank, and I'm just going to take, some number, 20% out of your bank account every month. And yeah, we'll send you a statement, 1099, file your tax return. And, you owe or you get a refund, but no more honor system. In other words, no more waiting until year end. We're going to take it out of your bank account. Or what if, as a form of stimulus, even though it's not stimulus, but they'll call it that, but we're going to put a countdown clock on your bank account. And if you don't spend 10% of it in the next 30 days, we're going to deduct, that much. So in other words, use it or lose it. So now all of a sudden, I worked hard. I made this money. It's in the bank. But you're telling me if I don't spend it, I'm going to lose it anyway. So I might as well go spend it. And of course, the idea is to stimulate the economy. But the point is, the number of things you can do, from surveillance to identifying your political preferences, withholding taxes, account freezes, account seizures, time limitations on your money. Your money's a countdown clock. It expires after a certain period of time, et cetera. I could go on and on, but you take the point, which is it's not your money anymore. I've always said to people, you put your money in the bank, it's not your money, it's the bank's money, and they'll give it to you if they feel like it. Well, this is that same idea on stilts. And this is like, and now the government's involved, and it's easier, everything easier, faster, cheaper about payments is also easier, faster, cheaper about surveillance, confiscation, account freezes, et cetera. And then people say to me, they explain that what I just said to you guys, and they say, oh, that'll never happen. It's already happening. I mean, it's already here.
The Fed's just admitted they want a future digital currency to not be anonymous. They will know what you're spending your money on. That means total control for them. Listen, I've been warning you over and over, and now the Fed's saying the quiet part out loud. They want a digital currency. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the biggest surveillance tool you will ever see in human history. They're now saying the quiet part out loud about the creation of a central bank digital currency. Take a listen.
So it would not be anonymous. It would not be an anonymous bearer instrument. We would be looking to balance privacy protection with identity verification, which has to be done, of course, in today's traditional banking system.
You just heard him say it. You don't have to listen to me. Joining me now is cryptocurrency expert and the author of Undressing Bitcoin, Leah Halper. Leah, thanks so much for joining us. You've been sounding the alarm about these central bank digital currencies for a while. Me as well. It's a big concern. This is the ultimate surveillance tool, isn't it?
Absolutely, and anonymity isn't even the worst of our problems. The worst of our problems is the fact that it's going to be programmable. Because it is digital, it means the money can be programmed to be spent in any way in which the central bank or the government decides. So one of my particular concerns is the World Economic Forum, because they're talking about implementing a carbon allowance. Now, this means each individual will be given a certain amount of, whether it's credit or whatever it is, carbon that they are allowed to emit. And how do they implement that? Through a central bank digital currency. So if I buy too many plane tickets, or if I buy too much meat, because those things are all supposedly very bad for the environment, my money when I go to fill up my car could then be declined. So now they're literally controlling what we can and can't do with our money. It's also important to realize that the money can expire. So during times of economic uncertainty, central banks love to print lots and lots of money, which causes inflation. But we could get to a point where they say, instead of printing money, guys, you have to spend at least 10% of your savings in the next 3 months. If you don't spend that money in the next 3 months, then that money is going to expire. And if you can't save money, well, then you can't build long-lasting generational wealth. You're always going to be a slave to the system. And, you know, I don't think people really understand the severity of this. Money is literally the energy which fuels your life. If you don't have freedom of money, you don't have freedom of anything. You know, Dan, I know you talk about the Second Amendment. You know, if they don't need to necessarily get rid of the Second Amendment, but they can just say they can program your money so that you can't actually go and buy a gun. So again, it really is the most tyrannical form of surveillance we will ever see. When they control the money, they control the world.